The problem with traveling with a chocolate bar for 8 months, and you can, right? It's sealed, it's chocolate, chocolate is pretty shelf stable. But the problem with traveling with it nomadically is that chocolate breaks. All right, number 70. Here we go. Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I am your host, of course, Andrew Crusoe. If it's your first time with me, I want to thank you for joining me on what should be a pretty cool little travel adventure today. Today we're going to wrap up talking about Chitwan National Park and the lovely little Sauraha village right next to it. This is a cool one. We're going to wrap some stuff up. There's going to be some animals. Come along with me. I'm really excited to tell you about Sauraha and the final adventure I had, really like the final adventure I had on west side of Nepal. Now, Sauraha is a small village on the other side of the river from Chitwan National Park. If you haven't heard the public episode before this, I would recommend you go check it out now because it's kind of a part one to this. You can still listen to this and you'll appreciate it, but you'll have a little more context if you go back and listen to the episode right before this, which is could be a good place to start with this podcast in general if you're new. I think we have a few new people, so I want to say welcome. I really appreciate you, enjoying this journey along with me and witnessing the changes and the transformational power of travel and how I've been humbled and educated by the people that I meet and the experiences that I'm lucky enough to have. So we sort of pick up the day after our Chitwan safari where my friend M and I ran into rhinoceros. And that's actually the first photo that I'm looking at right now to jog my memory of these events. In the middle of Sauraha village, and we'll get to live animals as well, don't worry, there are some very cool live animals. In the middle of Sauraha village, there are several large pieces of art. One of them is a very large rhinoceros, a rhino statue, very cool, on Main Street. And there were all of these decorations. I'm not sure if I don't think it was a special per se time. I mean, it was almost Christmas Eve, to be honest. But Sauraha loves to decorate. The people of Sauraha really love their village, and there's all these like pinstripe colored flags lining, just kind of crisscrossing the tops of Main Street. And you've got these little tali kitchens and these hotels, and it's kind of what you might expect. But Em and I wanted to do something really cool. After checking out some souvenirs and a lot of carved wood, and there's a bit of a video of that I'll probably put in the show notes. Show notes can always be found wherever you're listening to this. They're in the YouTube description or they're in your podcast app where they normally are. And I do put some work into the show notes because it's nice background info. And I've edited quite a few shorts a couple years ago of this experience. So they complement this podcast in a nice way. And of course, if you do follow me on YouTube, I do really appreciate it. But in addition to that, we wanted to check out the elephant stable, and there's kind of an interesting area with a suspension bridge. And we decided and I'm surprised I don't have any photos of this. I think I have a funny video that I'll put in the show notes of us. We rented some bikes. It was like $2 for the day. It was really, really cheap. And I got a blue bike and she got a red bike, or maybe this is a magenta bike. It was a little bit cliched, gendered in a way. but we had a lovely time, and I really recommend renting a bike in Sauraha. There aren't that many cars. And you can go to the west side, you can go over by the hill, and you can go in to it's called the Elephant Breeding Center. And there's a suspension bridge that goes over to the Elephant Breeding Center area. The bridge goes over a little tributary, the Ladhari River, Ladhari, Ladhari, is a tributary. It flows into the Rapti River, which is the border of Chitwan National Park. So we were pretty close to the park. So we get to this, this reserve area, and there's just a huge, like, massive suspension bridge, very narrow, like a meter wide, but very long. And we cross to the other side, and the bummer of this was we go over there, and we got there a bit, I want to say it just closed, if I'm recalling correctly. But it was a very large area in front of the breeding center. I think it was a Sunday. A very large area in front of it that had cows walking around, and there were ducks in the Ladari River, and a large, it's hard to identify this bird from the photo, but I think it's probably just a very large duck, but a very, very colorful duck with like this tan body with tan front, but the back of its wings were black. So there was a lot of like really attractive, interesting animals around. And I got a pretty silly video of, it was, you'll see in the show notes, of the cows just being goofy. And we sort of like walked along the edge of the Rapti River where it kind of connected. We crossed back over the suspension bridge, even though we didn't get to see the elephants. We'd already seen elephants the day before and rhinoceros, so we weren't feeling deprived. But we basically wandered around the coast of Rapti River. And it was at that time that I took one of my favorite photos I've ever taken. There were a group of women that were trawling, I think is the right term. They were sort of casting their nets out into the shallows of the Rapti River. And it was very hazy along the horizon, but what was cool about that was the sun, as it got lower, just created this fantastic lighting and atmosphere for photography. And the people who support this show for just $10 per month, and you can cancel anytime, there's about 22 photos that accompany this episode, and it's like thousands of photos now that I've released because every episode has behind the scenes content. So you get behind the scenes photos and occasionally video of this whole experience, and just about every episode has dozens of photos that go with it. And it's a really cool way to support the show. And when you do become a supporter, you get access to my Hawaii audiobook, which is something like 20 hours of content. And that's cheaper than buying it on Audible. I'll tell you that. And you can cancel anytime. And every dollar goes to support this show. This show takes quite a bit of energy to record and edit. And I do put a lot of energy into the show notes. So I'm really appreciative to the people who do support. I have supporters who have, one in particular who has been on the Patreon for over 7 years. Over 7 years. Can you believe that? I am so humbled and honored that she is continually interested in what I'm doing. And she's been a big supporter of the tropical sci-fi that I write as well. So you know who you are. Thank you. Mahalo nui. And if you are interested, you can go to Patreon, Patreon. If you listen to podcasts, you probably know about Patreon already. But if you don't, it is the best way to support artists because they have their own little subscription blog and they can put whatever they want up there. They can even do live events, which I'm considering doing. If you're interested in me doing a live event, I was thinking about doing a Q&A for people who support me at any level just to see, what that's like and get as big of a group as possible. Please comment if you're interested in me doing a live Q&A on how I do travel kind of on a shoestring budget and have all these adventures and manage to make it work and not go into debt and have a unusual and magical lifestyle that I've worked really hard to figure out, basically. I know I feel very lucky, but I also worked hard to make that happen. It's hard work and it's luck, which I think a lot of things in life are. So it's patreon.com/Hello Crusoe, which is also my Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, you already know it's HELLOCRUSOE, which apparently is slightly strange spelling. I've noticed a lot of people here in Asia, They're like, why is there an E? And I don't know. English spelling is weird. But it's Patreon, Patreon, not patron. They put an E in there. patreon.com/hello, CRUSOE. And I really, really appreciate every dollar of support. And I answer questions. If you have any questions on there, I answer questions a lot faster for people who support the work, because I have to prioritize the people who are actually really, putting their money where their mouth is, as they say. You can also follow for free, by the way. I'm totally down for you following for free. I do release free content on there from time to time, and there's already a fair amount of free content on there. And right now I'm actually doing something with my first tropical sci-fi novel, which is inspired by travel as well, where I'm releasing it every Monday and Friday on royalroad.com, which is it's an interesting experiment. You can go to the Patreon and read about that. I'm doing kind of a special data leak edition of that, where it's tropical sci-fi, but it's in a deeper context. And you can check that out. It's pretty cool. I'm releasing my whole first tropical sci-fi novel I'm putting on Royal Road, and you can follow. That's all free too. Royal Road's totally free, and you can get it. You can read it. It's a full chapter every Monday and every Friday, and you can comment on that. And if you like sci-fi, you can go check that out. Anyway, back to the travel. This photo on the East Rapti River is one of my favorite photos I've taken. The sun is glistening in its silhouettes. There's a silhouette of a person. It's just such an atmospheric vibe, and one of the finest photos I've ever taken. It is just a golden, slight lens flare, but not to a J.J. Abrams level of lens flare. It feels like a National Geographic photo, and I can't believe I took this photo sometimes. And you just get this feeling of connection with the land that they have. There's also a photo I took facing the other direction, which is a totally different. You would think it was a different day because the light is hitting them from the front and it's all evenly lit. And it's just a very interesting contrast. And you can see they're wearing like red saris and checkered patterns, and nothing's matching. And they've got poles where I guess they're poles like with sharp points at the end, and they're just fishing and stabbing into but the other great photo is the sunset photo that I stumbled upon. I was there at the right moment, and there's a cloud just caressing the top of the disk of the sun. And it's this most of it is, well, I should just describe the experience of being there, because some of you aren't going to see this photo unless you support the show. I'll probably release this one to Instagram, though, because I like to remaster these in high dynamic range. You can follow me on Instagram, too, and you can get some of the past photos, I'll do a couple for free. This one is so cool, I might have to release this for free, because I just love it, and it's probably good promotion. Because the whole photo is very cool. We were sitting in this weirdly dug out area that wasn't filled with water, but the river is in the distance, and the only source of warmth in the whole photo is this golden orange outlined disk of the sun with this whisper of a cloud above the top. And it's so dramatic, the hotness of the sun contrasting with the coolness of the land, this greens and blues. Anyway, it's a great place if you like photography. Chitwan is a great place to just appreciate natural beauty, even though there isn't like a Grand Canyon. There isn't, some crazy mountain nearby. It's one of the flatter places in Nepal, to be honest. But there's something so charming about it that's really hard to put into words. That night, we wandered around Sauraha village trying to find good veg food. And we found a good spot, and I ended up getting sucked into this micro adventure where I don't recall all the details of this, but I ended up meeting the family who ran the restaurant. And that's one of the cool things when you have a friend who speaks the language, even though she was not from Nepal. She was really smart. And a cool friend, and we just ended up like hanging out with them behind the restaurant. I think a lot of Westerners might not realize that for a large percentage, I would say the majority of restaurateurs, if I could use what sounds like a pretentious word, they live in the same building that the restaurant's in. They're not making like that much money, and it makes more sense to live right where you're working. That's true for a lot of families in South Asian countries. And yeah, it was delicious. I got some thali dish. I don't remember what it was. I did include a photo of the menu for supporters just so they can see. There's, the kaja set. There's momos. You got to try the momos, by the way. When you go to Nepal is famous for its dumplings, these momos. They're like the size of a golf ball, a little bigger. And they put everything in them. Sometimes they put beef. Sometimes they put, fish. But the veg momos, because I'm plant-based, the veg momos were quite good. And sometimes they're crispy. Sometimes they're a little softer. But it is definitely... Don't miss it, because Nepal is famous for its momos. It's a big part of their tradition there. But yeah, we woke up real early the next morning to catch the bus back to Pokhara. Well, I was going back to Pokhara. She was going to Kathmandu. She had to leave Nepal. It was kind of sad. So we got up around 6:45, packed up our stuff, cleaned out each of our rooms, got out there. I think it took two... We had to take a tuk-tuk to north side of Sauraha. And if you do go down there, which I really recommend, the hotel managers are really helpful. They really genuinely want to help, and they can give you advice on where to catch things and where to catch buses. And usually in Nepal, you just go and you hope that it's going to be there, plus or minus 30 minutes, and you just give them cash. And you're on. There's no buying a ticket beforehand in most of these buses in Nepal. It took us about 4 hours, actually, based on these photos, to get back to Pokhara, because that area of the roads isn't as good. It's okay, but it's not as good as the road going from Pokhara back to Kathmandu, obviously. Although you do connect up to that road. The last third of the trip, you're back on the road heading west into Pokhara. And when we got into Pokhara, it was pretty funny. I was quickly reminded, because I'd been in Safari Land, I was quickly reminded that, oh shoot, it's Christmas Eve. And I was reminded because there was someone dressed as Santa Claus at the bus stop when we got off. And I wonder if there's any audio that's useful in this photo. Just me laughing at Santa Claus. So once again, we took a photo before we went our separate ways, and it was cute, and we stayed in touch. And I didn't really hear from her again until a few months later. We didn't really connect again until I went to Sri Lanka, which we'll get to. So I got back into Pokhara at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I think I just went to some cafe, had a food, and ate a meal and had a food. I don't even know. I don't know how to talk anymore. But I was pretty tired and was happy because I'd kept my room in Pokhara the whole time. So I didn't have to bring everything, which was nice. As I said, that room, as I said in the video, I think that was the one that went viral and got over 100,000 views on TikTok. That was $4 a night. Pretty great deal. The one problem with the $4 a night room, though, was that it had no heating and no cooling. And you don't need cooling in October or November, as I've said, but it was starting to get pretty cold at night, and I had to wear pants in bed at night. It was getting to that point. It was getting close to freezing at night, and it was tough. It was tough. I still boggled why there wasn't some kind of heating. So anyway, after a cold night before Christmas, I woke up and I had heard about a gathering on Christmas Day at one of the little, I want to say warung, but that's an Indonesian word. But basically we would call it a warung, like a little cafe on Fava Lake. I'd met this couple from Britain like a week before, and they had invited me. I think that, yeah, I'd met them at nearby a little cafe, and they were very nice. And they were volunteering to distribute jackets to poor people in these villages. Very cool project. And I'd asked them if there was availability, but there wasn't availability to volunteer. It was something you had to arrange beforehand. And I went down to this little cafe, and I met them, and there were fireworks, if I'm recalling correctly, over the lake. And I brought kind of the strangest Christmas I've ever had, to be honest. I brought something that I'd been carrying with me since I'd left Honolulu 8 months before. And I originally got 2 of these. It was a salted macadamia nut chocolate bar of Hawaiian chocolate, Hawaiian cocoa beans. And I had brought 2, and I gave 1 to my great uncle when I was in France. And if you want to hear about that adventure, you can go back. It's probably like 20 episodes ago, 25 maybe, when he graciously showed me around Rennes and Sarzeau. We went to Mont Saint-Michel, that touristy island, monastery on the edge of Brittany. But I still had 1 left. And I had been saving it for some special moment. And the problem with traveling with a chocolate bar for 8 months, and you can, right? It's sealed, it's chocolate, chocolate is pretty shelf stable. But the problem with traveling with it nomadically is that chocolate breaks. So when I opened up the bag, the chocolate just came out in little nuggets. It was they were in all the nuggets, edges were rounded. It was almost like I was pouring out a bunch of little chocolate balls. So I poured it out onto a little plate, and I shared it with my new British friends, and they had some peanuts, and we had a lovely quiet Christmas evening. I don't really have that many photos of Christmas. I think I must have slept in just to recover. I don't recall the morning of Christmas, to be honest. I know that I did a video call with my family. But yeah, we're talking about Christmas. I mean, I'm releasing this in November, so we can start thinking about Christmas anyway. And there were a few trees, very tiny trees set up in front of certain restaurants. And there was some, perfunctory Christmas observance. But of course, Christmas is a totally foreign holiday to Nepali people. That's not in their tradition. Diwali and Tihar, well, same thing. They call Diwali Tihar. Tihar is a much bigger deal. New Year's is a much bigger deal to them. But it was nice to see some semblance of Christmas in a country on the other side of the world from where I grew up. New Year's Eve was sort of similar. We met again at at one of the restaurants near the lake, and they did fireworks, and it was fun. And actually, there was one cool thing about New Year's Eve, and I don't know why it's really weird I don't have a photo of this. I took video of this, which I'll put in the show notes. There was dancing. There was a big deal. New Year's Eve is a big deal. They set up stages on Main Street, and there was traditional dancing, and it was a party. They shut down all of Main Street, and all of us were just kind of wandering around. Pokhara is actually pretty fun on New Year's Eve. There's kind of almost like a carnival vibe. People are selling things, and there's a lot of crowds, but later on the night, it really empties out, and it's quite peaceful, and there's no traffic because they closed the roads. So that was an unexpected bonus, an unexpected delightful thing. I did have, one of the last things I saw was a sign of all the treks, and I did have this pang of regret that I didn't get to go on a multi-day trek. Like I said in previous episodes, I had a toenail infection that got bad. I had to go to a hospital and I had to get antibiotics. And it was it was not good. So I had to take it easy. Luckily, by the time I got to India a couple days later, it was in pretty good shape. But hiking in a multi-day trek in such cold conditions would have most likely made my toe worse. I could have lost a toenail, just stuff like that. It was really disappointing. I have this photo of hand painted, it looks like, of all the treks. ABC trek, which is the Annapurna Base Camp, 8 to 10 days. Poon Hill, 4 to 5 days. ABC is one of the most popular ones. It's the big one. There's the Mardi Himal, which was the one I was looking at. Mardi Himal, you can just do 2 days of that and see. You can get some great views and come back if you want, or you can continue and do a full week. You can go around Annapurna 1 itself, which takes 2 weeks. Just staying at these little, I want to say ryokan, but there's another word for it. In Japan, they would call it a ryokan on Mount Fuji. What do they call it? Like little homestays. It's funny when you travel to other countries, you get favorite words, but the favorite words don't always match with what you're talking about, even though it's kind of the same idea. And you end up with misnomers and weird combinations of things that are, sometimes they're funny. Oh, they do talk about Chitwan National Park on here. 1 night, 2 days, 2 night, 3 days, air tickets. So I have noticed, and this was the first place I'd been that had real trekking and rafting and like real wild stuff. And I've noticed that many places will have these, signs right on the street of saying, these are the big things. We have packages here. It's true in parts in Sri Lanka. It's true in certain areas like Rishikesh, or even somewhere like Dharamshala, where Dalai Lama lives, which I would go to in the future as well. That's a cool story. There will have these packages and things, and I never do them because I like to do my own pace, and I feel like it saves money if I just kind of book directly. It does save money. But one of these times I might actually do one of these packages. It also, the front of the sign was all in German. It's pretty funny to notice what languages you see. Of course, you see English the most because of the British Empire, partly, and partly because of America's influence. But you do see German, and in certain parts of the world, you see a lot of French, including Vietnam, where I am now. You even randomly see Hawaiian words sometimes. The supporters will get a photo of this sign for the Malama Spa, and I don't know. They must know. I want to know what Hawaiian or what person who loved Hawaii decided to start a spa called Malama Spa in Nepal. I had to take a photo of it. Malama is a beautiful word in Hawaii, where I lived for 5 years total. And it means to care for. It means to tend to be the steward of. To Malama, the Aina, means to care for the land. Malama Aina is what they say a lot in Hawaii. So it was really cool having just come from living in Hawaii, and then 8 months later seeing Hawaiian words on the other side of the world was a pretty strange, pretty surprising experience. And I do regret not going into the spa. I was not feeling very abundant at that time, to be honest. And that was a mindset that I would continue to work on. Keeping in mind, not to date this too much, but this is 2022. This happened. So I awoke on January 1st and took pictures of plants, apparently. It was a very beautiful place where I was staying in Banana Lodge. I do recommend you look it up. It has an amazing view of Fava Lake. But I would be leaving soon. 2 days later, I packed everything up, got everything pretty reduced down. I think I was down to like 16 kilos at that point, maybe 17. Back then, I had a computer that was heavier than the one I have now. But it was very bittersweet. I really liked staying there. I think that if the visa had been more, if it had been possible to get more time, I would have been tempted to stay longer. But it was complicated to get more than 90 days and rather expensive. And I was like, well, it is getting cold here. I'll go down to India. A lot of things happen that I don't have photos of, obviously. I have a lot of these vivid memories of working at 11 p.m. I don't like to do this anymore, but at the time, I was writing The Kaleidoscopic Universe, my tropical sci-fi meditation, romance, thriller extravaganza. I was writing that almost every night because it was so quiet, and something about where I was psychologically, emotionally at the time really lent itself. I wrote some things in the afternoon, but I wrote most of that in the middle of the night. And I would put the desk, they had this until I moved. They moved me into another room. I would put the desk on the bed sometimes just so I could sit on the bed because it was warmer. And I would write sitting on this bed with this small desk on top of the bed. It didn't hurt anything. It was a relatively clean wooden desk. It was kind of funny. And then they moved me to the other room and I had a real desk and I wrote probably the other half of the book, the first draft anyway. I went on to rewrite it on Bali, technically 2 summers in a row, but that's another story. Anyway, it was bittersweet leaving Pokhara. I had such lovely experiences there. I'd walked through fake Pokhara Disneyland more times than I could count because it was actually kind of a shortcut to go through Pokhara Disneyland to get back to where I stayed. Because you could go through and you go through Pokhara Disneyland, then you're on Lakeside, and then there's this Lakeside Trail. And then you can get to all the other cafes. And it's fine. Technically, that's kind of like a public trail, but it's a little bit of a gray area, like a lot of things are in Nepal, to be honest, when it comes to property boundaries and stuff. And I had rowed across Feva Lake, and I'd gone up to the stupa with M, and I'd gone into the cave, the Gupteshwar cave, and I'd gone to the Bat Cave, and I'd crossed the suspension bridge over the gorge, and I'd been to the Seti River. I'd seen the Seti River. I'd seen the dangerous swing that had been shut down over the gorge because somebody got hurt. I'd met locals that had told me funny stories. I saw a live sarangi performance, which I've talked about I talked about all this in previous episodes. And it felt like such a full experience. And in the midst of all of that, I had somehow written I think the first draft was 85,000 words. It was the fastest I had ever written a book. And I can only attribute that to the fact that it had been simmering in my mind. I mean, frankly, the entire pandemic, I had been slowly outlining and figuring out the story that I wanted to tell. A big part of the Kaleidoscopic Universe, not to self-promote too much, but a big part of it is dealing with isolation and how you react when everybody you love is suddenly gone and when different people come into the picture. And the kind of emotional decisions you make when you're not in a great place. That's part of it. I have no idea what I would have, who knows what would have happened if the pandemic had never happened. But that's a big topic. So overall, I felt quite satisfied, even though I didn't do one of the major things I wanted to do, which was a multi-day trek, at least Mardi Himal. And now I don't think you can go without a guide anymore. They've become more strict. Back then, you could sneak around. I met people who had, they knew where to get on the trail, and they didn't. I knew a few people that, granted, they didn't, they weren't from the West. Their currency was not very strong, but people are pretty creative when they want to be about avoiding paying for anything. And I knew a few people who did Mardi Himal without paying anything. And that was an interesting thing for me to think about too. What is the moral imperative there? Is that cool because they're, able to do something they wouldn't afford to do? Or is that a bad vibe because they're in some way cheating the Nepali government? And is the money that the Nepali government collecting going back to the people? There were all these interesting things that I was reflecting on that ultimately didn't come into play for me because, and they were all just questions. Like I didn't have any hard answers, but they didn't come into play for me because, like I said, I got that somewhat embarrassing toe infection that was more complicated. I don't want to get into it, but my foot was not doing well. But yeah, I felt bittersweet leaving Pokhara because I never had anticipated that a foreign country could feel like home so quickly. And I would think about this for several years after I left Nepal, how I felt so at home and so safe in Nepal. I was very surprised. I didn't expect it, you know? And it's on my bucket list to return. Definitely. So I packed up and I took a little, I think I used their funny, they had I think it was a Patau. I took a Patau ride or something to the bus station and took the long 8-hour bus ride. I have one photo from that bus ride of the misty hills and the sandy gravel stop. Because you stop halfway. It was at 1:15 in the afternoon. And funny enough, that is photo 1111 of my favorites because I heart the photos that I shared on my Patreon. I heart them so I know these are the ones I'm going to correct and post-process and fix the brightness on. I heart them to go in my favorite album, and this is photo 1111, and that seems like a beautiful way to wrap up episode 70 of Wanderous, photo 1111, that you can't see, but it's a funny number. But if you support the show, you will see it. And if you don't support the show, that's also totally fine. I just want to say thank you for following along with me on this adventure. It gets better and better from here. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to leave a comment on Spotify. I read all of them. I reply to all of them. Don't hesitate to leave a comment on YouTube. I read all of them. I reply to all of them. And I really, really, really appreciate them. Often one comment will just make my whole day. So if you want to make my day, leave a comment. Seriously. And be sure to subscribe if you like the show. It's a free thing you can do, and it makes, it ensures that you won't forget that I exist and you won't miss any of the amazing adventures coming up. We have one more episode of Nepal coming up, and then a major transition and a bit of a tragedy that happens in India, and then a triumph, or not a triumph, but a rescue, you could say, that happens in India, and some big surprises happening in India, actually. So I hope that you'll join me for that. Thank you so much, and until next time, aloha.